Hello, everybody. My name is Magdalena Hasibeder, and as the head of the organization team, I want to welcome you very warmly to Vienna, on the screens at home, everywhere in the world, and here. Thank you for coming. And the first person to speak is our rector, Mrs. Ulrike Süch.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, students and conference attendees. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the symposium Battimento Realizing Its Potential at the MDW University of Music and Performing Arts, Vienna. We are very happy and honored to host this conference, and I welcome you here in presence and also everybody worldwide online. Be very welcomed. Our youngest department, the Department of Early Music, has set itself the objective of becoming an international forum where current topics in early music and historical performance practice are not only discussed, but also researched. The potential of Battimento lies in its ability to offer a holistic approach to both music making and musical education. It fosters practice-based research and invites musicians and scholars alike to engage in an interdisciplinarity exchange between past and present musical practices. Art and research can mutually inspire each other and profit from each other. Artistic research leads to the production of new knowledge and serves an independent contribution towards the development of the arts. It assumes a diversity of forms of knowledge and understanding. I'm delighted to welcome all the conference contributors who are willing to share their research, their artistic works, and their experience with this community. It's my pleasure to welcome our international keynote speakers, Robert Gjerdingen from Northwestern University, USA, Peter van Toor from Örebro University, Sweden, and John Mortensen, Cedarville University, USA. The Battimento Realizing Its Potential conference will combine music-making practice and pedagogy, research and performance practice. Over the next 4 days, we will immerse ourselves in the world of Battimento, bringing together a diverse group of artists, academics, and researchers. I would like to thank our hosts, the Department of Early Music and its organization team, Magdalena Hasibeder, Augusta Kampan, Erich Drexler, Jason Marmaras, Sobin Jo, and Dimitri Bondarenko, whose efforts have made it possible to bring together the Battimento community. This interdisciplinary conference is realized in cooperation with the Department of Organ Research and Church Music, the Ludwig van Beethoven Department of Piano in Music Education, and the Department of Piano. I wish you all an inspiring 4 days of lectures, concerts, workshops, and discussions. Please enjoy Vienna. Enjoy the MDW, and you should know you're always welcome, and we're happy to welcome you again whenever you come to Vienna. Thank you so much.
My name is Eugène Michelangeli. I'm the head of the Department of Early Music. So welcome. Welcome to Vienna, and welcome to all our listeners online and viewers online. It's a great pleasure to have you here at our department. And we are here, we are actually the youngest, as the rector said, we are the youngest department at this university. We opened in 2020. And from the beginning on, it was very important for us not only to offer a standard sort of early music education here, but also to try to develop and to become a real forum worldwide, let's say, about performance practice, about early music, and such a symposium is for us a great achievement to have you all here and try to connect and try to exchange worldwide on this subject. We opened in 2020, but we are here at this location only since a bit more than 1 year, and it's a very nice place to be because we are in the heart of Baroque Vienna, of course, and we are also in the building of the Ursuline convent from here, and the Ursulines were very into music education. This convent was created at the end of the 17th century, and from the beginning on, they did a lot of music and really invested a lot of energy and time into music education. So it's nice for us also to be here at the same place. And the Ursulines are, some of them are still here and laying down underground. And I'm sure they did practice a lot of partimento. So let's see if they like it when we are now doing it ourselves. I mean, there was many people to thank, and I think Magdalena will go on thanking all the person who made it possible for us to meet here now. But a special thank also to the Erasmus Plus program, who made it possible for us to invite many people to teach at some workshops. So it's a great chance for us, and we are very happy that so much did work well with the Erasmus Plus. So have a great time. We will for sure meet in many occasions now in the next days. Welcome, and thank you for coming.
So let me take the moment and say a few thanks to some people, especially to my team that Mrs. Süch has already introduced, especially to you, Dimitri. You were the connection to the Institute for Organ and Church Music, and I'm really very, very glad that we could do this collaboration together in this house, because the Institute of Organ and Church Music has been here for a very long time. I've already studied here. And then the whole team, it was a great work together. And on behalf of the team, I want to thank personally Augusta Campagne, who is our mentor, let's say that, because she does not teach anymore here, and she does help us a lot. She did all the international conversation, and she knows how to do a symposium, and she hands over this knowledge to us. Thank you so much. You are our emerita honoris causa. So last of all, I just want to wish you a very good week together, a lot of talks, music, and working together, trying out something. And we want to start with music. 2 of our students do a partimento by Pasquini for 2 harpsichords, for 2 keyboard instruments. It's a partimento in D minor, and I think the second movement is your own creation, not by Pasquini. So we just have to open the lid, and after the music, it's a bit too early as I saw on the clock. I would suggest that we go on with the lecture, because Robert Gjerdingen likes a few more time, as he told me. So thank you for your attention, and have fun and a good week. Sorry, I have to add something. I forgot to introduce you. That's Tsuyo Yang. and Sarah Maria Pilvax, students of our department. Thank you very much. I want to hand over the microphone to our deputy head of the institute, Johannes Weiss.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here in Vienna. The room is too small, that's very nice. First of all, I will close the lid. I have the honor to introduce our first keynote speaker, but before that, I will do also a little thank to, before all, Magda and Augusta Compagno for really being the heart of the organizational team. Thank you very much. But also to people behind, which should be mentioned. It's our secretary of the department, Berta Gutmann, and the big helping hand. And the big helping hand, Marco Primoltini, thank you very much. Should not be forgotten. Partimento, it's now 25 years that the word partimento is re-arrived in the world of musicians. And even my brother-in-law, Philip, who teaches at the Music University in Munich, he's a pianist and jazz pianist, has nothing to do with early music, uses partimento books and sources for teaching his piano students to play, meanwhile. So this is how partimento spread, not only in the early music departments, but crossed these borders up to jazz and modern piano. And a word of the 21st century is to embody something, or embodiment in general. This is everything's about embodiment, and this is very interesting because such subjects as basso continuo, as melody, harmony, schemata, etc. In the 20th century, these words were mainly part of a, let's say, more or less theoretical approach, theoretical teaching. And this is what Partimento changed a lot, not only Partimento, but combined with basso continuo and other things, and practical solfeggio. It's the embodiment of this learning techniques, of to learn something with your body, to do it, not only to be on the chalkboard and to write it down. And this is, I think, the biggest change which is taking place at the moment. And now I come to our keynote speaker. I think he is one of the, let's say, of the most important engineers, background engineers, who did this teaching machine come to work anew, to get in motion anew, because it was somehow almost forgotten. And I'm talking of Robert Gjerdingen. So Robert Gjerdingen, thank you for being here. I think with your book, 2007, Music of the Galant Style, not the gallant style, but the galant style, was not the only one, but maybe the most important kicks which the practical music scene needed to really go to start anew. So you are known as Professor Emeritus of the Northwestern University in the United States, but you have taught in other universities like Harvard or others. So let's go into your field. You will do that of yourself. We will talk today, and that's very funny, about Johann Sebastian Bach, because also we will talk not about Johann Sebastian Bach. Very interesting. So I stop now to introduce you. Thank you for crossing the Atlantic. Thank you for being in good old Vienna. Welcome, Robert Gjerdingen.
No, but just, yes, but the original slide. Well, I will do whatever you say, but I still want to see the original slide that said Partimento on it. Okay. I just want to say, you see the letter R, P-A-R? Behind the letter R is the Capodimonte Palace, okay? Working on the walls of Capodimonte, the father of Cimarosa fell off and was killed, all right? Just to say, Partimento was made by real people, okay? He fell off the wall, he was killed. Now, the boy, little boy, and his mother, what can they do? She did the laundry, the washing, for some monks. The monks knew some people at the conservatory. They said, this boy is very nice, and we're having to feed him, so why don't you feed him? And they put him in the conservatory, and when he's 12 years old, we have the manuscript. He might be 13. We have the manuscript of him studying partimenti based on Francesco Durante's partimenti. It's amazing, really, that this is a living tradition, or a dying tradition if you're the father. But I just want to emphasize these are real people, and some of what I'll talk about today you can understand more if you think of a 12-year-old boy doing partimenti. The 12-year-old Cimarosa could not have done Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto. Okay. There were limitations to their abilities. But anyway, let's continue with my talk. Now, magic from the back, please. Okay. Letting go of J.S. Bach. I'm speaking today as a historian, cognitive psychology person, and ganz klar, the worst keyboard player in the room. But I hope to show evidence. So I won't play the evidence, I will show the evidence. And if you want to take a Fenaroli partimento and realize it in the style of Beyoncé, I bless you, okay? But today we'll be talking about what kind of things were done in southern Italy in the 18th century. Okay. So I came to the Hochschule 50 plus years ago for only 1 hour. That's my total experience. I was accompanist for a tenor, and this is what he sang. It was a long time ago. So, could this musical giant be a bad model for Italian partimento realization? After all, why? The Naples master Francesco Durante, whose partimenti Cimarosa studied, was only a year older than Bach. They were almost classmates, you might say. So wouldn't they have the same musical style? Bach copied a Mass by Durante. Durante may not have known who Bach was. The arrow only went one way. Why? Lutherans copied Catholic music. Catholics didn't copy Lutheran music. The Lutherans were heretics. They were the enemy. Okay. Now, think about art in early modern Europe. Contemporaries like Dürer and Raphael. The artistic trends flowed north, not south. Okay. Slowly. Okay. So let's take a look at a fugue by Bach. It's in a horrible key, but Italians wrote in horrible keys too. The Lorenzini partimenti from Rome, the Santa Maria Maggiore, go to 9 flats and 10 sharps. lots of doubles. Okay. I love this piece. I think it's just wonderful. In the well-tempered clavier, the three-voice fugues are the most Italian. All right? But there is great complexity here. For example, there's two real parts here. And if we look at the Printer schema, which has 6, 5, 4, 3 in the melody and 4, 3, 2, 1 in the bass, we'll see, after we listen to it, how complex it really is. Now notice those notes are very clearly set apart. They're the longest notes in their context. The bass is on the downbeat of each measure. Okay. I think this is Andras Schiff playing. And understand, as I'm speaking against Bach as a model for partimenti, I just love this music without end. Okay. The level of diminution is 16:1 for the Printer. In the 18th century, this is extreme. Okay. And even when he was the most Italian, the level of diminution remains high. If we would solfege this in the manner of Baraguana's recent book about Neapolitan solfeggio, it would be like this. We'd have the Printer schema, and we'd have la, a kind of appoggiatura to the main note, and then amen, where in an amen fugue, you just say ah, and then at the end of the piece, you say men. It would be a la, da, 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 sa, da, da, da. Okay. It's beautiful. It's not a tradition that comes from Pachelbel or Buxtehude. It comes from Italy. Right? But the diminution is 12:1. Right? Now, Italians were almost never like Bach, even when they were Germans. Giuseppe Dole is from Bavaria. But as a boy, he went to Naples, and he became so Italian, a little bit like Hasse, that he became a maestro at the conservatories, the only non-Italian in the 18th century, to my knowledge. Here he's talking about 4 examples of a tied bass that requires, a 2 above the tie, and then it resolves. I'll just play the first 2 examples. There's nothing amazing here, but the level of diminution is 3 or 4:1. It's very simple. Now, interestingly enough, Dole does articulate the idea, the concept of diminution. In the first part, he's describing, this is a Romanesque schema, down a 4th, up a step, down a 4th, up a step. He's describing the figured bass, and of course it's messy, it's 5/4 and then a 9/8. But if you think about it more contrapuntally, it's a uniform sequence of 7/6 suspensions between alto and soprano, all right? And then what I think is so interesting, below he says, the same motion in diminution. And so he's going up a 5th, down an octave, up a step, up a 5th, down an octave, up a step. There's a certain level of abstraction here. But again, if we think about the diminution, it's only 4:1. By the way, the realization is taken note for note from Fenaroli. Okay. These are interchangeable parts. Now, Dol could perform like a virtuoso. This is a concerto-style partimento. Giorgio Sanguinetti has talked about these a lot. There's a tutti or ripieno at the beginning, and then in two voices, a solo. Personally, I believe that if we're talking about 13-year-old musicians, the solo is all they could do. They're not playing another bass part at the same time that they're doing the solo. That's just my opinion. And there's two examples of the Prinner schema here. I'm using that as a comparison, so we're seeing the same schema each time. Let's listen to this. Because I believe that a ripieno part should be similar, at least, to the solo parts, I've realized this in somewhat in the style of the solos. It goes on for 2 more pages. It's virtuosic, but if you look at the diminutions within the same schema and don't count note repetitions, it's only 2, 3, or 4 to 1. It's quite simple, really. Now, Bach could write 2-voice works with Italian schemas, okay? Here we have Prinner schema in the dominant, and we begin with a Meyer. Etc. 9 to 1. That would be the best sort of Bach to imitate, but sadly, American students at least often think of this sort of Bach. And I'll just play this because it's beautiful Berlin choir singing this. Gott sei Dank für diese Musik, aber sie ist gar nicht im neapolitanischen Stil. Okay? I truly love Bach chorales and play them almost daily on my harmonium, okay? But when I first heard them, these men were in political office. This is a very long time ago, okay? In my experience, the very worst realizations by today's students, and I'm speaking about North America, I'm sure that you're much better here, but result from they write Lutheran 4-voice chorale over an Italian bass, then try to add diminutions or ornaments to make all the voices wiggle for no particular reason, okay? And the results are not good. So let us see, what did 18th century students do? And here I must thank Peter von Thur for making a beautiful edition of the Gallipoli manuscript. Now, when I first heard Gallipoli manuscript, I knew where Gallipoli was, right there. It's one of the great battles of World War I. It almost destroyed the career of Winston Churchill, and it made the career of Gamal Ataturk. I mean, it was a crucial battle in the war. To this day, Australian and New Zealand soldiers who died by the thousands in this battle remember this time. But It's over there. Gallipoli, Hunestadt, on the coast of the Italian boot, okay, close to Bari, in the Kingdom of Naples. All right? So it's the other Gallipoli. Realizations, probably by a student of Durante, around 1750, according to Peter. Yeah? I say probably by a student because in my own view, some of the realizations aren't that good, but many are very good. If you look at the opening C in the bass, and then C in the three notes, and then down to A, up to B, down to G, it's the bass motion, down a third, up a step, down a third, up a step. Notice that for most of this, you only need one finger to play this. Okay. The counterpoint is minimal, and it's very appropriate. This is an excellent realization. But do you see how thin it is? Another one. So simple do, re, mi in the bass, do, ti, do, or do, si, do in the soprano, in B minor, then the same down a third, up a step, movimento, and again, only one note playing for much of the time. Okay? A simple movimento in the bass. When you see a rapid descending scale, so many people try and play the rule of the octave, you know, and do something fancy. Just parallel tenths. It works for Mozart, it works for Haydn. I think it worked for everybody at the time. A fugue. There's a 4-to-1 diminution of the da, 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 da in the second measure. But if you're waiting for the third and fourth voice to enter, go get lunch now. They don't. This is a 2-voice fugue. This is all you get. Okay? The bass is a down a fourth, up a second, or a Romanesca movimento. And I think this is an example of this being a student, because the octave G, when the bass comes in, is the wrong one for this schema. And ordinarily, you're on the fifth or the third at that point. So I think the student just took a wrong path. It's a characteristic melody, but I would be very surprised if you find someday that this is by Durante himself. I think it's a student. And then in octaves, there's a Meyer schema where we go da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, like that. Notice that there's a lot of for lack of a better word, there's a lot of air between those two events. That is the galant style. I mean, if you think of 17th century style, everything is continuous, okay? And a lot of students, when they realize appartamento, it's almost as if they're afraid to have a rest. You know, like if they don't play continuously, something bad will happen. But in a lot of this music, it's better the less you do. Now, speaking of the Romanesque schema, or down a fourth, up a second, here's from the Perfidia manuscript, which Nicoleta Paraschivescu found and published. She has had an arm injury and she can't be here this week. I'm very sorry to see her. She's one of the best students I ever had, and I mean, she was already beyond me at the point where we got to talk a little bit about things. But anyway, this is so good, I wonder if it isn't by Durante, but I have no evidence for that. But it's a really fine realization. But again, often just one note in the right hand. About 10 measures in on this one is the bass that Cimarosa worked on. It's where it goes da 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 like that. Now, Eric Boaro, is Eric here? Possibly? No. Okay. He believes that some fragments of Durante, like Partimenti, are from as early as 1707 to 1716. This is very early, okay? This is very much like one of the collections of modi, or styles for appartamento. So these were written down on the back of an aria, so they're like just jottings of someone. And this is the longest of them, but it's, I would say, completely in the Durante style. Sacchini and Paisiello went to Paris and were influential in setting up the Paris Conservatory. Okay. Fetti here is talking about Leo and Durante. And he said, for these students, they wrote numerous figured basses to which the name partimenti was given. Instead of striking chords following the French and German usage, these masters demanded that the accompanist have all the accompaniment parts sing in an elegant manner. In this connection, the Italians maintained an incontestable superiority in the art of accompanying for a long time. All right. So here at the Paris Conservatory, Hippolyte Collet published a 370-page book on partimenti. He was a student of Sacchini and taught harmony to César Franck. Okay? So this is someone in the middle of things. Here is his realization of a Durante partimento. This is Durante's modo, or style, for this situation. And you can see he's copied it very carefully, but not slavishly. So for example, recognizing that this is the modulating printer, he moves the top of the melody down so that he ends up on the third, in the third measure. So if we take Boiro's date and this date, there's more than a century, almost a century and a half of consistent Durantist realizations, which are thin. Even as late as 1855, Panseron, who had studied with Salieri and some other Italian masters, writes a realization. This is in a textbook, 3-volume textbook for pianists. This is a realization of a book 6 Fenaroli Partimento. And it's what I call a puzzle partimento. In other words, the second measure is the accompaniment to the first measure. And after you play it for a while, you realize this. And so as long as that is going on, Panseron gets this right. But the minute it changes, he starts playing chords in the right hand. And I think the later history of the practical harmony course at the Paris Conservatory was mostly about playing chords in the right hand in response to basses. However, as late as the class of Durand with students like Piernet and Debussy, they still called these works partimenti. Okay. Now, these patterns were crucial to 19th century piano improvisation. So here we have Kalkbrenner showing how to deal with Romanesque schema. In France, they always started up a fifth, and then they went up a step, and then I think this is it came from Catel, I believe, but I'm not sure. Anyway, let's listen to some of these. This becomes virtuoso pianism. This could have come from any Italian regola. Now we're in the piano world. Hold on to your hats. At the bottom, he says, you should learn many of these variants and then put them together with the previous ones that we've learned. And then he says, and you can modulate. Okay? But that was the program in the time of Chopin. Chopin once thought of studying with Kalkbrenner. So what about the Leisti? Let's just look at one of the keyboard pieces of Leo. These are variously called esercizi, lezione, toccate. We have a printer, then the modulating printer, a Monte, Fenaroli, comma, all the standard things. Leo, in some sense, invented a lot of this. But again, see how thin it is. It goes on for quite a while. We've heard this discourse before, by the way. Okay. We have the two printers, followed by a Monte, followed by a cadence. So this is really thick harpsichord music in the style of, well, I think there's going to be some Mattheson done here, but more of a North German. So be inspired by the Italianate Bach, but let the other Bach go, okay? Some suggestions. Emphasize only two auditory streams, treble and bass. Keep the texture thin, keep the melody conceptually simple. Bring out the schematic construction. Use imitations wherever possible. Just like Bach, emulate Italian models. Use ornaments sparingly, please. And have fun, okay? Now, let's just review this very quickly. 2 parts in 1. There's the subject, counter subject, and answer. Subject again. Printer riposte. Let's compare this with a Leo fugue. For every 1,000 people who, or 10,000 or 100,000 people who have heard a Bach fugue, there is one person who has heard a Leo fugue, okay? And now there will be many more. I've scored this as if it's a wind quartet, just to help you hear the lines a little more clearly than it would be. Whoops. Apologies. Just enjoy the sound. It's a beautiful episode right here. Bach wouldn't do that. Interestingly enough, both Bach and Leo have a kind of two-level melody at the end. But Leo's subject is so much simpler. And if we look at the counter subject, notice that the second interval is 3, something 3, something 3, something. It's double counterpoint, the simplest kind. I mean, here's that low level of diminution. Here's an example published in Paris in 1772, a composer unknown, but it's an exercise in double counterpoint. And here's just a modern transcription. But if you count through, on every weak beat, there's 3 or 6, without exception, except for 1 or 8. Three, 6, 6, 6. So very much in the Leo tradition. They were central to the teaching of the Paris Conservatory for most of the 19th century. Okay. In the class of Durand, where Debussy was and other people, they completed the last Fenaroli fugue in 4 voices. Okay. Bach had a huge influence there, only beginning in the 1870s. Now, he could do flawless double counterpoint in a vocal style, but that's not the Bach that pianists learn today. So like the song I started with, Bach, Bach, nur du allein, sollst nicht die Stil meiner Partimento sein. Okay. And we are running a little bit late. So this Sarti fugue is at partimenti.org if you wish to hear it. It's from the late 18th century. He became important in Milan. He taught Cherubini, and the style of the Sarti fugue became the academic fugue of the Paris Conservatory. So there's a direct link. I'll just have to get through it very quickly here. Okay. Vielen Dank. Partimenti.org. It's all free and it's all there for you. Thank you very much.
Robert, thank you very much for this hint on Bach. You have been so fast, literally, that we now have really time, a long time, for all the questions, maybe related to this comparison between Bach and doing Partimenti and having always Bach in mind, because we all practice Bach so much that we cannot lose him. So open room for all the questions. I think we have 2 microphones. I go left and Erich helps me.
Hallo, Frauke Jürgensen here, invading from Institut 1. Hi, everyone. I was just reminded of a thing my first counterpoint teacher said to me. He said, if you start with Bach when you're learning fugue, it's like teaching a kid to swim by sending it up the 10-meter tower. And it's maybe not the best starting point. And I was also reminded of an example that we ran into last week into our fugue class. So my students are writing counter subjects for the first time. Okay. And I gave them a example from somewhere in Marburg that it's a Muffat fugue, and it's got this nice subject and lots of 16th notes. If you look at it closely, it's just one chord underneath. And we got many, many notes as a result. A little bit like what you said with writing the 4 parts and making them wiggle. And so I had great fun then showing them that the actual original counter subject is 1 note set along this entirety of the subject. So thank you for an inspirational talk that also ties in with so many questions of modern pedagogy and why we do things the way we do, and maybe why we should rethink them sometimes.
I was... can you hear me? Yeah. In the States, I was asked to give a seminar to advanced graduate students at a national convention. The idea was to get them, to interact with the older scholar and enjoy the convention. So we worked a little bit before the convention, and we got there. And one of my first exercises was, I played this in the bass. Okay. And I said, imagine that you're 12 years old, you're an orphan in Vienna, Naples. I'm in Vienna. Naples, and you are going to play the appropriate right-hand part. And I said, you can submit these over the web. And okay. I got such an amazing variety of things. I got some Poulenc, I got some Hindemith, but no one ever did this. Not even close. So, you know, things that were once self-evident have become, I don't want to say lost, but let's say misplaced. Okay. And so I agree with you. I've been in a lot of, both as a student and a teacher, a lot of fugue classes, counterpoint classes. And at least in North America, we make it so incredibly difficult. No one in North America, to my knowledge, teaches two-voice fugues. Whereas the Italians did this all the time. A two-voice fugue, it's a game you can win. Whereas when you add in more voices, your odds of success go down very rapidly. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Professor, in yet another example of the Gjerdingenian bon mot, you coined the phrase voices wiggling about for no reason. And I delight in all of these, and I keep records of them and enjoy them purely for the snark. But is there a serious point where diminutions must be more purposeful than, and if so, what would you say that was? Thank you.
Diminution is one of the great arts of the 18th century. I mean, in a book like Neat, you know, the Protestant musicians were writing hundreds of these things. But for a young student especially, I don't think that was really in the curriculum in Naples. I think they learned things from solfeggio, and they used the mental memories of their solfeggio melodies to realize partimenti. And sometimes they involve some diminution. But for the students, I think they were mostly remembering rather than advancing diminution as an art. But it's certainly important. But again, it's always the why are you doing it? I mean, that's an open question. When I was a freshman, I was at this new school that Walt Disney had built called the California Institute of the Arts. And I won't name the name, but a very famous European early music performer came and visited with us. And my classmates had put together a trio sonata performance. And they ornamented it from top to bottom. There was hardly a moment when they weren't going or and when he was done, he was saying, there was a lot of ornamentation, he said. Why? They couldn't answer. They had no idea. They thought they were supposed to, you know. But I think it's a mark of a more advanced musician to be able to do that well. And of course, when it's done well, if you look at 18th century transcriptions of Corelli violin sonata performances, assuming that they're even a little bit accurate, I mean, the amount of decoration is staggering. But I think, again, that the very best modern players doing that do those very lightly and fast. So the core notes are still there and very clear. But look, I'm not the performance practice person. Thank you for your question.
It works. It's working, yes. Thank you, Bob. Concerning the idea of diminution or creating a melody, I always had this problem with students doing partimento, especially, and I'm sorry to say, with continuo students.
They did too much, you're saying?
They cannot, or they have problem in finding a suitable melody. Instead, they tend to play chord and add frills and frills and frills and frills, but the melody remains static. So the problem is, from one hand, inventing a melody is different from adding ornamentations, and especially very fast ornamentation, to something static. It's a totally different set of mind. So, and I think that this is what we should really teach to students. So a melody is a melody. It's not a chord and with added frills. That's it. I don't know if you agree.
Well, I would say that thinking about the history of music teaching in the university, you know, harmony became a universal course in Anglo-Saxon countries. Everybody takes harmony. Nobody takes melody. You cannot find a class in melody. But it's a really important topic.
And about the fact that you're right, in Naples, there was not a thing like a course on diminution. But I found some interesting manuscripts on counterpoint. And
yes.
in one of them was of the teacher of Verdi,
Vincenzo
Lavigna. I was a student of Fenaroli. And, but I found something very similar in many other manuscripts. And they have a very different way of teaching counterpoint. They start with a cadenza semplice base.
Yes.
So something like that. In two voices. This is the Ursatz. And then
about 4 pages of diminutions. Yeah.
and then with diminution in the bass.
Yes.
And when the cadenza semplice is over, they start doing it again with the rural the octave and with the motte del basso. So I think that diminution, they were taught together with counterpoint. And so it was their way of learning how to create a melody from few slow notes. Thank you.
I agree completely.
Thank you, Professor Gjerdingen, for your wonderful presentation. And I wanted just to say 2 words from another point of view, because I'm a player of a melodic instrument and a low string. So I play cello and viola gamba. And we have documents that testimony that also cellists were partimento players.
Yes.
And so cellists could now play wonderful chords. They could play arpeggio. This is a long question. Anyway, perhaps just to say that we have some documents for cello, and they studied so much diminution because they had to become the great virtuosi. And virtuoso means to play many fast notes in a melodic instrument and not long notes. So perhaps just to say that perhaps merging different points of view, also from a melodic instrument, this wonderful, how do you say, landscape of Neapolitan training could be more clear. just to say it, because next days we have also me and Robert Debray
That's right.
as melodic instrument players.
No, I've taught Partimento to melodic instrument players, and I always have them play the bass, and then it's complex, but it works. And I think it's a good way to teach harmony to melodic instrument players.
Thank you. I am Matteo Messori. Thank you for everything. I wanted to add something about the performance practice of this predominant two voices style. Of course, I'm Italian, I'm from Bologna, and I'm also Bachian. So, but somebody was before me in Bologna, a Bachian. So, for example, Padre Martini. And we know from Giuseppe Paolucci, a student of him,
Yes.
Arte Pratica di Contrappunto, there is a footnote, very interesting, where he complains, and these are, I think, words by Martini, we know through Paolucci, that Italians were able to play only with one finger for hands. And so that the good Father Martini had to write sonate d'intavolatura, and d'intavolatura, the Amsterdam sonatas, the 12 very difficult sonatas that became a model for Clementi fugues from the Gradus at Parnaso, I think. And this, almost impossible to play fugues. They need a pedal board attached to the harpsichord, or early Florentine pianos, because in Bologna were diffused, widespread, were more than two voices. But in Bologna, we have many manuscripts of organ harpsichord music from the late 17th century. I think the CC 292, if I remember good, in Museo della Musica, where there are only two voices, and we are around 1680, and many figures to play, like Gasparini tells in the Armonico Pratico Chamber, le botte delle consonanze. So a very strong, like rock music, chords in the left hand. And I think they were for the professional players, not for the of course, the beginners or the many ladies who played harpsichord. The normal practice to play the two-voice texture with the ripieni. No? And so what we see is only like a violin part. And of course, they played the violin and continuo sonatas at the harpsichord. For example, the Opus 5 of Corelli by Corelli is, of course, the second violino e violone o cimbalo, and they meant the solo harpsichord. There is an Amsterdam edition. There are many copies of it in Modena, for example, only for harpsichord solo. And they played feeling the part. So what we see in Durante, in the Naples school, of course, is only the external texture. But what they did a continuo inside the solo melody. And this is very important for the performance of practice, I think, because Italians invented in that time the style of 10 voices continuo, and Heineken was a little bit shocked after the Venice travel. So maybe, of course, last thing in Bologna, Padre Mattei tell in the Partimenti, go to theater to listen a good singer in order to play the right hand on Partimento. Yeah. So thank you.
No, thank you. As I said at the beginning, I was talking about a pedagogical situation where we're talking about boys from 7 to 16, perhaps, and what would be appropriate in trying to recreate that as a historically informed performance. But if we expand this to all of music in Italy in the 18th century, I mean, just the Pasquini pieces are really in quite a different world than, they're closer to Muffat than to Leo, for example. In fact, when I was preparing for this talk just a couple days ago, I went to YouTube and there was a Galuppi Mass that I'd never heard. So I pressed play, and there was a beautiful printer, 16:1 in the diminution. And so I suppressed this. I don't want to have contrary evidence. I wish they would take this off the web, because this. But yes, so there's an amazing variety of things that are being done. And also, Naples was just one center. You know, Bologna is perhaps the second most important center later in the 18th century, and the most important for the Paris Conservatory, because Naples was in rebellion against France when the Paris Conservatory was founded. So it was hard to hire the rebels. Yeah. Oh, Marcus, thank you. No.
So, yeah, there was just now this remark, which of course is open the question of stylistical evolution
Yes.
during the 18th century. So, what is your experience regarding evidence that this style that you were now presenting to us, this two-voice style, was deeply coupled to the development of the gallant style and to the later 1730s onwards?
It's a very interesting question. I don't have an easy answer. I'll say two things. Leo himself was one of the most important in the development of the galant style that leads to Mozart, let's say. I would say Leo is maybe more important than almost anyone. Bononcini a little bit earlier, some others, but... And yet, you know, even today, if we think of a 20th century, 21st century composer, as a pedagogue, they can be very conservative. So the Italian conservatories were highly conservative. I mean, you maybe know that Conservatorio, they weren't conserving music. They were conserving little boys. It was an orphanage. So a conservatory was an orphanage. And they were very conservative in what they taught. You know, when I showed this, I called it, you know, more than a century tradition from the early Durante realization to Hippolyte Collet. But music changed tremendously during that time. I mean, Collet is writing at the time of the Chopin Scherzi. You know? So I think these were slightly, you know, loosely coupled. That a 1730s, 40s pedagogy continued through much of the 19th century. Fenaroli is contemporary of Haydn and lived through Beethoven's life. So I think it's entirely possible to do very gallant realizations, especially, let's say, Paisiello. I think with Paisiello, you almost have to sometimes. But this is a difficult question. Yes.
But so it's an interesting thing, this petrification of the gallant canon, which then rested through decades and centuries.
Yes, or imagine Claude Debussy realizing Fenaroli. I mean, yes, so I have seen a lot of conservatories in my time, and they, no matter how badly they do something, they will do it forever.
But without having any reason and knowing why they are doing
Absolutely.
this.
Absolutely. It's what my teacher did, and it was good enough for her, so it's good enough for me. Yeah.
So I have just a little footnote to the Gallipoli pieces. There are, I think, 3 of these pieces in the second book of the Gallipoli edition, where the link to the original Durante Partimento is unclear.
Yes.
You can't see where does it come from. And I remember that in the foreword of the edition, I still wrote that. I don't know what happened here. It could be compositions of the student. But I have figured out at least 2 of the 3. They are recompositions. So they are built on Durante Partimenti, but they are changed so much that you almost can't see it anymore.
I think that's the case with the Cimarosa version of the Perfidia manuscript. Yeah. It's not note for note, the Durante, but it's so close that it must have been somebody writing it out from memory for the student.
Yeah. But this information, where it comes from, is now in the new Durante edition that has appeared a few months ago.
Yes, Peter has produced a scholarly edition of Durante and will be producing an edition of Cotumaci, who probably studied with Alessandro Scarlatti. So it'll be an important set of partimenti.
Hi, I'm sorry to go slightly back to 12-year-old children, but I was wondering, the first step in partimento education, I have always assumed it must have been playing chords, like the rule of the octave and cadences. Do you think that's the case, and what would be the next step, or if not, what would be the first step?
Well, Fenaroli, was the first to publish lessons in what was plausibly the way a student would go. Because, well, Giorgio, correct me, but I think most collections are like individual sheets that got put together. That would seem to be the case for Fenaroli. What do you think, Giorgio? We have Giorgio here. We should ask him, really. Well, please ask your question again.
Yeah, exactly. Whether the first step would be playing chordally, and if yes, then what would be the next step? And if not, what would be?
Many of my colleagues, they teach Furno as a primer. I mostly agree, but I think that soon one should move to Fenaroli because Furno is not so interesting musically. They're quite straightforward and frankly a bit boring too. So I think Fenaroli is much more interesting musically. And the first book of Fenaroli is great for beginners. There are figures in first book, but once they learn to play partimenti with figure, you can move to book 4 without figures. And I think, yes, Fenaroli is absolutely the best choice. Maybe you can do some Furno before. What do you think, John?
I do recommend Furno because I think it fits the modern era, and the information that he provides is orderly, whereas many of the other maestri appear to have supplemented the written stuff with a lot of discussion. And so, for example, though I admire Durante and Fenaroli at the highest level, many things are happening at once in each new partimento. And that's not the case in Furno. Usually it's one bass motion at a time, which seems to fit what modern people want to learn. So what I have learned in teaching this is just how darn long it takes to internalize all this stuff. I just got an email a couple of days ago from a gentleman who's a big music fan. He's from Houston, Texas. He comes here. He's retired and his time is his own. He flies here to go to the opera. And he's a member of the Symphony Board of Houston and all this. So he's very into music. He started Rule of the Octave, I think, 4 years ago. And he wanted to learn it in every key. And this week he emailed me to let me know he had finished RO in 24 keys. 4 years, yes. So, there's a huge investment of time. So I always look at the simplest, most straightforward way, which I agree with Giorgio. Fenaroli is musically better. Furno is more straightforward.
And also I will add the small partimenti found in Durante Regole. They follow very strictly the rule, as John just said, about Furno. And also Cotomaci, the lezioni Cotomaci. Peter published just a wonderful edition of Cotomaci. And the first volume, I think it is comparable to Fenaroli. Is pedagogical interest and difficulty too.
But in all these cases, would you say chordal realization would have been the first
chordal
step?
Realization? Well, there's a problem with chordal realization. You mean in en quatre, as Bach said, no, in four, strictly in four voices. This is not Italian.
Well, if you look at some suggestions for playing the rule of the octave, it's not quite strict, but rather varying according to the consonants.
It's not strict, in fact. Chordal realization is good for the first steps, but I think you should follow the advice of Fenaroli himself. You should play the partimenti with semplici consonanze first, and then with dissonances, and Guarnaccia added, and with imitation and diminution. So you can play with chords, but always keep an open ear to the top voice, to the melody. The melody could be good also with chords, not necessarily that two things are opposite. You know, if you play with chord, the melody is bad. If you play with those chord, the melody is good. This is always true.
Just to come back to your question, we are discussing this in our team very often, how to start for the continual lessons. And I think that the thing is that we have to catch up a lot of time within 4 years. The children started at 12 or even earlier to sing counterpoint, two-voice counterpoint, of course. And we start with the rule of the octave, which is also a counterpoint of two outer voices, of course. And it embodies the students to do a lot in a certain style automatically. But we don't sing enough. That's your point. And I think it's just a very short time. 4 years seems a lot for a bachelor study, but to learn those things, you should start as a child. And I would be interested in what the students say.
Well, let me just throw in an alternative opinion. Alma Deutscher is a student here in conducting, and I started sending her lessons when she was 5. And I thought, she was very talented at 5, and I thought, well, at 5 she's probably like Cimarosa at 12. So let's start with the partimenti diminuiti of Durante. We never went to chords, ever. She has 2 operas now that have been performed professionally. She has professional management, I mean, a whole career. We never, ever did chords. I mean, think of how a child grows up. You really never take grammar and then you learn your language, but you already learned your language. So I think start with music, start with the diminuiti and go with that. And some will crash and burn, but I think they will develop a higher understanding if we don't tell them what the answer is. If we tell them that these are the units of music and you must make music out of the units, then I think they lose the breadth of what those units are. You know, they're not things in the world. Saying this, I do assign some people the rule of the octave, especially if they're 30-year-old Chinese organists, because they're working. They don't have. I mean, the people in China. I teach this one excellent organist via Zoom, and he's in China. And so I'll have a lesson, and then there'll be 2 or 3 weeks, and then there'll be a lesson. So for him, that works. You know, he's fluent in organ playing, but I don't know. I would be an advocate of, you might say, just diving in the deep end of the pool and learning to swim.
Before we come to the last question, I want just to add a personal experience from my, let's say, learning young person. I was doing keyboard music or studying organ, etc. Beginning of 90s, so far away from that partimento was a common knowledge. And I have to say, from the now perspective, Bach blocked me a lot when I look back, because I was surrounded by Bach, singing Bach in the choir. You had this wonderful Bach chorals, as you said, you had this wonderful keyboard music, etc. And then it went to, in my case, to organ improvisation, to composition, etc. And you always had Bach as an example. So you even if you started to improvise at the organ, you had Bach, and the teacher didn't stop me from that. That's what I would say. And so I would have been. I came to. Well, I learned it anyway somehow, but it was really somehow blocking, because it was too complex as a starting point. It was too complex also for composing. I composed my first pieces having Bach in mind, 4-part complex voices, and I think this is coming to your beginning of your thing. So Bach is a very genius composer, but maybe he's not the best as a starting point for improvisation and composition. It's just from my perspective. Would have been glad that my teachers beginning of the 90s would have been more into partimento, but they weren't. They didn't know it in that time. So please.
So I guess then mine actually segues perfectly with what you said and with what Magdalena said and with your point at the beginning, which is the short time frame to in modern pedagogy, and that when we're teaching either a contemporary composer or a historical keyboard player or whatever, especially historical keyboard players, we're not just teaching them to be a good 18th century Italian, we're trying to teach them to be a good 18th century French person, and 17th century French person, and 17th century Italian, and 16th century Italian, and all sorts of things. And it's like being multilingual without having a mother tongue. And it's a serious challenge, which I guess is why we keep talking about these curriculum questions as part of the whole debate. So thank you.
Yeah, one little thing I would like to add about your question about the chordal, whether we should start with chordal rule of the octave or other things. If we look at the situation in Naples, I think it differs a little bit depending on where you look in terms of the chronology. In the 1730s and 40s, there was not a lot of rule of the octave going on in teaching. That's my impression. But it increases in the 1760s, 1770s, 1780s. And this happens when the level went down. So I think the rule of the octave was a very good tool to secure what was being lost. If you look at the situation with Durante, how he starts with the cadential point, pom pom pom, then pom 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 pom. And in the Partimento notebooks, you can't see what's really going on because you only have the stuff of the teacher. And you don't see what the students do with it. But the counterpoint notebooks give the answers to what was really going on, exactly as you told Giorgio about Lavinia. You see that there was a variation counterpoint going on. So every time you get a new bass, there is something new played by the teacher that the student has to imitate. So my answer would be, no, they start with counterpoint. But it's very, very simple, and it's based on cadences. So it's a variation counterpoint, exactly as in the style of the counterpoint notebooks. But they did it on the keyboard first.
So, thank you very much to the audience, to the teacher colleagues, to you, Robert. Thank you for your keynote lecture. And I think this vivid discussion here was a very good starting point for the next day. So see you at 4 p.m. after a little break.